The Global Briefing on SAfm.
22 after 6 o'clock, let's get into the global briefing, which takes us from New Delhi to Manila and then to Washington. At the BRICS summit in India, Iran pushed emerging powers to take a harder line against Western military influence. And this, of course, continues to expose some of the fault lines inside the bloc that is still trying to settle, really, on where it stands on some of these issues. Joining us this morning to unpack things further, Dr. Joan Swart, a researcher in military science at Stellenbosch University. Dr. Swart, good morning to you. Thank you for your time this morning. So I want us to start with what is unfolding in New Delhi. Iran arrived pushing for a tougher anti-Western posture. Are we seeing BRICS consolidating in that position? Yes, we know that the standing together of BRICS, the positioning for stronger South-to-South relations, does not automatically translate into an anti-Western posture.
Good morning, Cathy. No, you're right that indeed it hasn't. So this is, of course, the BRICS meeting of foreign ministers in New Delhi ahead of the full meeting in September. So it's interesting, there are 11 full members of BRICS now, with about 30 members or states that have applied or showed their interest in membership. So this meeting it's in my mind less about a summit and more about a consolidation of alternative power networks, especially in the global south, outside of the traditional Western system. Now, you mentioned Iran. So Iran is diplomatically and economically very relevant within this large non-Western geopolitical space, despite the Western sanctions and pressure that has been put on it. And also important to note is that it is strategically very attractive as a critical junction or a convergence between Russia, China, and Iran. So especially in the past, let's say, year or so, we've seen a very stronger and growing cooperation between these three nations. In fact, Foreign Minister Arachi just in the past 2 weeks visited Russia and China and was very warmly welcomed there. You mentioned the fault lines. Indeed, as I said, there are 11 states, and India was the host of the summit. The UAE is also part of it. Now, the fault line is basically because of India and the UAE's kind of warmer relations to the West, and more problematic, I think, for the grouping is their relations with Israel. Who they UAE just Netanyahu just visited UAE in the past couple of days, and India in the last month or two. So that's basically where the fault line comes. But we must remember that multipolarity means that countries, even member states, want to be flexible. They want to have options in terms of being transactional and more issue-based. So it's not really necessary that they all agree on every issue at hand.
In the Philippines, Senator Ronald De La Rosa, this is the man who ran Rodrigo Duterte's drug war. He's reportedly refusing to leave the Senate chamber and is using parliamentary privilege to dodge an international criminal court warrant. That's a warrant of arrest. I mean, what does this tell us about the reach of international justice? He's effectively turned his own parliament into a hiding place, into a place of refuge.
This was kind of
it is quite
really
a story, isn't
smile.
it?
Yeah, and it brought to mind our situation or incident with al-Bashir in, I think it was 2015. We also let him sort of go. To me, the main point here is that it highlights a collision between international justice mechanisms and national sovereignty politics. So, there's a conflict between the two because the one basically interferes with the other one sometimes, and it takes away options of diplomacy, of being flexible, and of having your own position. But I must be honest, and you mentioned that he kind of barricaded himself in the Senate building, but apparently he left now yesterday, and his whereabouts are unknown. But one thing that is interesting to me is the Philippines actually withdrew from the ICC in 2019. But at the moment, they don't really have a unified state position. So um, some of the politicians agree and some don't agree that he should be arrested. We must also remember that some very important countries are not members, and this include the US, Israel, China, Russia, India, Turkey, and Pakistan. Um, so several member countries have actually signaled a reluctance or political unwillingness to enforce warrants, such as for Netanyahu, who've made several international visits, and his warrant was not enforced. So it's continuously generating this debate around credibility and enforcement of
Sure.
the ICC.
Dr. Swart, very briefly, the US has now scrapped what is that controversial $1,500 visa deposit. It's the equivalent of around 247,000 Rand locally. This is for travelers from 50 countries for the FIFA World Cup. How significant is this?
It's not entirely significant. I think it's much more symbolic, and it shows the tension between the US in terms of their security-driven immigration policy, um, and then a kind of economic and soft power symbolism, if I like. And it's 15,000 US dollars, right? So that's pretty steep, and it's heavily weighed towards African countries. You mentioned 50 countries, 14 of those are in Africa, including all of our neighbors. So that's kind of interesting. And what is also interesting is that there are 5 countries on that list that is actually playing in the US in the World Cup: Algeria, Tunisia, Senegal, Ivory Coast, and Cape Verde. Um, so it just, the World Cup in itself is kind of financially inaccessible for many ordinary international fans in any case, especially from the countries that are on the list, where we would love to see that global sporting events is kind of very much more open
Mm.
and not linked to economic privilege.
Okay. Dr. Joan Swart, we'll leave it there, researcher in military science at the University of Stellenbosch.